Can you imagine getting advice from Ozzy that you're too rough and you're going to have to tone it down?
Yeah.
I gave my love a cherry that had no stone. I gave my love a chicken that had no bones. I give... Sorry.
Welcome to the Rock and Roll Gutter Podcast. Music from the wrong side of the tracks. This is a show that drags you through the gritty alleys of sleaze rock, gutter glam, and all forms of dirty rock and roll. We're here to crank up the volume and dive deep into the dirtiest, sleaziest, most glamorous rock and roll out there. Whether it's the classics or the underground hits, we've got you covered. And now, here are your hosts, Andy and Gary.
Hello there, and welcome to the second episode of the Rock and Roll Gutter Podcast. I'm your host, Andy, and with me is my co-host, Gary.
Hey there.
And Gary, what do we have on the docket for today's episode?
Well, today, for our second episode, I figured we would tackle the band Smashed Gladys, who were an instrumental force, during New York City's sleaze metal renaissance. They came from the embers of the vibrant punk scene in Toronto, Canada, where lead singer Sally Cato, she started as a singer in the art rock band The Concords, and guitarist Bart Lewis, who was a friend, did a brief stint with Canada's most dangerous band, the Vile Tones. Ooh. And together, they both departed and came to New York City. After they got here, I guess they picked up a drummer by the name of Matt Stiletto and a bass player by the name of Ken Fox. And Sally and Bart met singer-songwriter Tommy Boyce, who I guess, do you remember the TV show The Monkees back in the day, Andy?
Of course I do. Hey, we're the Monkees.
Yeah, they wrote hit bubblegum songs for the Monkees. But anyways, under Boyce's guidance, I guess, took him under his wing. They began rehearsing at a well-known studio in Midtown Manhattan.
So Smashed Gladys starts playing venues around New York City, and they're building up a good following, getting some word of mouth out there. Things are starting to come together for them. And they're strutting around the scene, rubbing elbows, hobnobbing in the same circles as other sleaze heavy hitters of the day. Bands such as Circus of Power, The Thrubs, Princess Pang, and my mom's personal favorite, the Cycle Sluts from Hell.
That's like an all-star lineup of sleaze rock and the New York City scene back there. Yeah. I have a fondness for most of those bands.
Yeah.
And I'm sure certainly down the line, we might even be covering some of these bands in future episodes.
Correct.
Invariably, during this run, of course, they run into Gene Simmons from Kiss, and as Gene has done with other bands, like bands like Angel, Van Halen, Loudness, he offered Smashed Gladys a production and a management deal. The band then went into the studio and they recorded close to, I guess, an album's worth of material, and that was produced by Simmons. And during that time, he tried to capture the personality and the raw grittiness of the band, and he did that perfectly, and then did them a favor and shopped the demo for them, and apparently landed them a record deal on the UK label Heavy Metal Records. And by the end of 1984... I guess Smashed Gladys were in the UK recording their first album, which would go on to be titled Smashed Gladys.
And when they returned to the States, the band began touring. They were opening up for bands like the Dead Boys, Ace Frehley of Kiss, Nazareth, Blue Oyster Cult, and Rock and Roll Hoochie Coos, Rick Derringer. Smashed Gladys were selling out venues in New York City and then around the tri-state area. And that's brought them to the attention of Elektra Records, whose vice president, Howard Thompson, signed the band to a record deal in 1986. The band celebrated this signing by performing a sold-out show at CBGB's, and this actually was one of the first venues they'd ever played after moving to New York City.
Could you imagine one of the first places you get to play when you get your band up and running in New York City is the legendary dive bar CBGB's? I mean, that's got to be a bright spot on the resume, don't you think?
The list of bands that have started there and launched on to bigger and better things.
Legendary place, but good for them,
Yeah.
Elektra went on and they picked up the rights to the first record that was recorded in England, which is, ironically, it's not on Spotify and it's fairly difficult to find. It's out there, but it's, you got to do some digging to try to find it. But they picked up the rights to that record and they sent the band back into the studio so that they could work on their second record, which was going to be titled Social Intercourse. I believe that was recorded in New York City with Rick Browdy, but it was also recorded, I believe, in Los Angeles with Michael Wagner, and he was doing additional tracking and mixing for the band. So, ironically, while they were in the studio making the record, who did they run into but Ozzy Osbourne, who I guess was in the studio next to theirs. And they conned him into doing a guest appearance singing background vocals on their song Cast of Nasties. So here's a little bit of that song, Cast of Nasties, with Ozzy singing background from Smashed Gladys' album Social Intercourse. Osbourne warned the band that, some of the titles of their songs and some of the subject matter that they were singing about on the record might get them in trouble in certain markets and maybe banned altogether from retailers, like Walmart or whatever, who are on a puritanical bent. But can you imagine getting advice from Ozzy that you're too rough and you're going to have to tone it down?
Yeah, better dial it back.
Could you imagine? It's like, you might want to dial it back a bit, but I guess he was right, and touring certain Midwest states kind of was dangerous for the band, back in the day. They had song titles like Lick It Into Shape, Legs Up, 17 Going On Crazy, Dive in the Dark. So you can understand, that sometimes the Midwest, but, as a result, the band still wanted to sell some albums. So they did both an explicit version and a clean version of the album when it was released to the public in 1988. And here's the clean version, although still filled with double entendre deluxe. Here's the song Lick It Into Shape from Sally Cato and Smashed Gladys. I remember going out and I bought the cassette when it was first released, and it happened to be the explicit version, and I still own that to this day, by the way. And in Amazon reviews for this album, one fan says that, it's a shame that the CD is censored while the album was not censored, and apparently the 2006 re-release is a remix, and that's all you're going to find unless you stumble on an original release. And ironically, Spotify only offers the censored version of the album, so go figure.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Here's the song Legs Up from Social Intercourse from Sally Cato and Smashed Gladys.
Too drunk to fight about it. You look like you feel at home on your back with your legs in the air. Kissing all the boys, kissing all the girls. Now you're kissing the carpet at the bottom of the world. Then you get up, you go out, and you do it again. That's 'cause we found you legs up. Everybody wants you just the way you are. Legs up, keeping the backseat warm in my car. Legs up, over easy, just a little bit of class, just a little bit sleazy. Get on home before you get all messed up again. Skipping out of school, breaking all the rules. Young and wasted, nobody's fooling me when it comes to burning out while you're young. Giving it
I don't know, Andy. I guess it became really tough. They tried to land a stadium deal after the album, but they were unable to get one as an opening act on larger tours. And so the band wound up headlining that year in smaller venues and clubs across America instead. In an interview with the website Sleaze Rock in October of 2010, Cato was asked whether Smashed Gladys' deal with Elektra Records was a good one or if they got screwed over, and Cato replied, "Well, there's a lot of detail in that answer. When you go for a record deal, you have to prove that you have a following, which we did, possibly a bigger one than most of the unsigned and competing New York and LA groups, with the exception of Poison, who were about the same level as us, except that we had a British album available. Next, you have to find someone to represent you to the record companies, like an agent, a manager, or a lawyer. And we had a lawyer who was hardworking but inexperienced. We all knew the big-time agents in the metal world, and they all came to see us. Then, if a record company shows interest, you make a deal with them, and at that time, now that you have a demo deal, you go out and get the best manager possible, one that makes the record company feel confident that they have enough clout and money to get you on the best tours, buy the most amount of radio support, etc. Well, I wrote just about everything, and the business side I pretty much did alone. I got the lawyer, I got the agent, I made all the contacts. I dealt with the record company contracts and negotiations. And during this entire time, I maintained relationships with all the big management companies. 2 people were responsible for signing Smashed Gladys to Elektra, the vice president and the head of A&R. This was a pretty big deal. Both of these guys had some pretty heavyweight bands that they had signed, but the problem was the president of the label, who had once signed some pretty huge acts, decided he was not going to let us sign the deal until we had a manager. This was unheard of, especially since it was common knowledge that we were courting every manager in metal. By doing this, he sent a huge message to the industry that he did not take us seriously. The money we got was standard for that time. I had already secured a great agent. He was the president of ICM, the largest agency in the world. Next, we had to choose a record producer. They would not let us use the guy who did our first LP. They would not let us contact Mutt Lange or any other decent producer. They, without asking for a reference at all from Poison, put us with the guy who produced their album. We ended up having to fire him halfway through the project, and then Elektra found out that they had locked him out of the studio for their LP and had virtually produced the album themselves. But because of contractual obligations, they had to put his name on the Poison record. Then we had to tour, and this is where it gets unreal. At the time of our record release, there were not that many stadium tours out yet. Guns N' Roses was with Iron Maiden, and that was about it. So they sent us out to headline in medium-sized venues until a stadium slot came up. After 3 months of touring, we came home, and that night our agent called to say that now that Guns N' Roses was touring with Aerosmith, that the Iron Maiden opening slot was open, and that we were going to be taken to Florida to start opening for them in 2 days. Of course, we went through the roof. It was perfect. At the same time, we were told that Poison was getting ready to tour and were looking for an opening act as well. Well, at about 3:30 that day, we get a call from Elektra saying the president would not support the Iron Maiden tour and that we would not be going out again to support our album. We'd already decided to take Poison up on their interest in us as an opener when we discovered that Elektra had blown that for us too. The president of the label was not going to let us succeed simply because I was a female. This was made clear. Now think about it. Has there ever been a female heavy metal performer who has made it to the size of, say, Steven Tyler, Axl Rose, Bon Scott? No. And the old white boy network who controlled things back then were going to make sure that it stayed that way. It's just fine, though, because we have more female performers now than that there have ever been, and they come in shapes and sizes and styles that have never even existed before. Look at Pink, for example. So we walked into the president's office and demanded that if they could not behave like professionals, that they should release us from our recording contract immediately. This took about a week. Getting our publishing back, though, took about 3 years. And that was basically the end of the road for Smashed Gladys. Sally Cato, unquote.
You know, one thing that Sally doesn't touch on in that interview is the fact that Elektra Records would not release a video for the Social Intercourse album. And at that time, MTV exposure was everything. So no video, no exposure. Your band's fighting a major uphill battle at that point, and your record label's tying your hands. Yeah, and then Smashed Gladys were recording demos for their third record when they received offers from producer John Paul Jones of Led Zeppelin fame, and even Mick Ronson, who you would know from David Bowie and Ian Hunter's world.
Heavy hitters.
Yeah, big time. And they decided to go with Ronson for this, and they began pre-production with him. But unfortunately, this was the time that Mick Ronson would get sick, so the project ended being put up on the shelf.
Yeah, that's a shame about old Mick Ronson, legendary guitar player, and gone way too soon.
Yeah, so much talent.
Well, combined with that, Ronson got being sick and all, when the project was kind of put on hold indefinitely, then came the tragic overdose of their third bass player, Mark Sleeker, I believe the name is. And combined with that and the trials and tribulations of the male-dominated industry that Sally was continually facing and fighting, she'd had enough. And she left the music business and returned to be a successful graphic artist and writer. She also designed the original illustration that became the cover of the third Smashed Gladys album titled Raw that was released after Sally Cato's death. And unfortunately, Sally Cato died on May 19th, 2020. And regarding Sally's passing, guitarist Bart Lewis on his Facebook page on May 31st, 2020 said this about Sally. Sally was a driven writer and during the last several years had essentially locked herself away and into writing mode and had written 5 books and a screenplay. Unfortunately, along with the quarantine and the writing, out came the cigarettes, and Sally and I smoked a fair bit back in the day, and he also said that Sally had a bit of a new age streak, which tended to make her shy away from traditional medical doctors, I guess. So rest in peace, Sally. The recently released Smashed Gladys album titled Raw dropped in 2021 and is currently available on Spotify and other streaming platforms. And I guess it's a collection of some of the works that were initially the demos for the third record. They were remixed by the band's first producer, Mark Deemley, whose credits include AC/DC and Paul McCartney. The album rounds out with an additional 4 songs from the Gene Simmons sessions.
And he didn't charge him a dime.
That's a lie.
Yeah.
I'm taking a cut.
So Smashed Gladys' best-known lineup consisted of Sally Cato on vocals, Bart Lewis and Roger Lane on the guitar, J.D. Malo on bass, and Matt Stoluto on drums. Sally also appeared in Motley Crue's completely fucking ridiculous video, Too Young to Fall in Love. You know the one where they do the kung fu.
Yeah. Tommy Lee's got nunchucks. Hiya!
Everybody was kung fu fighting.
Women in cages.
After the demise of Smashed Gladys, Roger Lane went on to join the Throbs. J.D. Malo joined the Michael Monroe Band, and then also went on to join Cycle Sluts from Hell. Bart Lewis went on to teach music until the pandemic hit. And then during quarantine lockdown, he was instrumental in putting together all the tracks that became the Raw album.
And we like to play a song from that album, Raw, titled Black Beauties and Blue-Eyed Blondes.
With all the praise we're heaping on this band, that doesn't mean that they didn't have their critics and detractors. In fact, there's a writer for the website Classic Rock who goes by the name Sleaze Grinder, And he wrote a pretty savage review of the Social Intercourse album back in September of 2015. And this is what he had to say about it. Gary?
They got caught up in the major label feeding frenzy fueled by the success of, Motley Crue, Rat, Quiet Riot, Poison, the rest of the usual suspects. Seriously, all you needed back in 1988 was pointy boots and spandex pants, and you'd find yourself inking a six-figure deal with Elektra Records, which is exactly where Smashed Gladys wound up. And the inglorious result was 1988's Social Intercourse, one of the most unintentionally hilarious bombs of the era. Everything about this album is so over the top, you can hardly believe it's real. They went from no bullshit to all bullshit pretty quick on this one. And the songs were so overtly sexual that they borderlined on adolescent. Titles like Hard to Swallow, Lick It Into Shape, Legs Up, Cast of Nasties, etc. That's all pretty exhausting. But here's the thing. Every hardcore sleaze beast had a copy of this record in 1988, and we all wanted to love it. On paper, it's got everything you could possibly want in a sleaze metal album. And as I mentioned, with just a slight tweak towards cool, it would have nestled snugly in the pantheon of the legendary hip. But they blew it by dumbing things so far down that no one could take them seriously. Yeah, I'm reasonably sure they were acting on Gene Simmons' advice on this one because it reeks of one of his hack jobs. Unquote.
He's a little harsh. I have read some of his other reviews, and he seems to be more even-handed with some of the other bands that he talks about. But he clearly had an issue with Smashed Gladys.
Yeah, I guess if you wanted to dissect it, that way you certainly could. It's certainly no more, I guess, juvenile lyrics than AC/DC or any of a number of other bands out there that, they're not exactly PhDs in the lyric department. But
right.
I think he's missing a little bit of the point is it's supposed to be sleazy. It's supposed to be crass. It's supposed to be grab you by the testicles first before it makes you think, and that's the whole point of some of these bands that we're trying to cover. And there's no denying, I guess, the musicianship on the album because it checks all the boxes that you're looking for. Twin guitar attack, thunderous drums, Sally's range of vocals, and especially her able to get that grit in her voice that some of the other female singers are known for, but she certainly has that and then some, so. Yeah,
she had the perfect voice for this band.
It is a funny review, though. I mean, the guy obviously makes his point, I guess. But I don't know. I still play this album with some regularity. And obviously, there's certain cuts that are always in my rock playlists. So I thought this would be a good point to cover for our second episode. And that pretty much brings this to a close. So we're glad any of you guys out there that are still listening to this. We appreciate you, and stay tuned for our third episode, which is tentatively going to be what, Andy?
The London Choir Boys.
The London Choir Boys. Now, there's a slice. There you go. Well, anyways, thank you for joining us, and until we meet again, Andy?
Thanks, everybody. Keep it trashy.
All right, we're out.
And to our fallen comrade, Mr. Mink, I think Pink Floyd said it best. Wish you were here. You're here in spirit, brother.
Godspeed, Mink, wherever you may be.
Listening to the Rock and Roll Gutter Podcast. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into the dirty world of rock and roll. If you did, please consider subscribing and leaving us a review on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps us reach more listeners like you.
And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Rock and Roll Gutter Podcast for all the latest updates, news, and more.
Got questions, comments, or suggestions for future episodes? Reach out to us at rnrguttermail@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you.
So join us again next time for another wild ride to the raw and gritty side of rock and roll. So until then, keep it trashy.